Hi guys, we are starting today with our water glass. So we are going to need a couple of supplies today, so if you want to grab these things. Of course, you need your pencil sharpener. We are going to use the white charcoal that came in your kit. You'll probably want your eraser. And then, of course, you're going to need your other two charcoal pencils, all right? We are not actually going to sketch it out in regular pencil. There's an interesting thing about these two. So graphite is a lot harder and creates a smooth surface, and charcoal will not stick to that smooth surface. So remember, we're using a paper that has some tooth, our charcoal paper. It's also a toned paper. So we want to make sure that we're also using softer materials so that it can attach to these fibers. The graphite is actually going to crush the fibers and make it a slick surface, kind of like my table, and so the charcoal will not stick to those places. So please try and avoid using that. If you like to refine the tips of your charcoal pencils, of course, you can also use your sandpaper here. Remember, we kind of put it on its side and rubbed it and rolled as we were rubbing to make sure it got to a nice fine point. Another option for you. So we're going to be using this water glass. Oh, I forgot one thing. Don't forget your blending stick. So we have one that we were using for graphite. We're going to use a different one for the charcoal. You might want a piece of scrap paper so you can rub off any extra charcoal that you have. So I'm going to just grab something, for me, like a Post-it note. So I'm gonna stick that up to the side so I know where I can get rid of some of that excess. So just, well, you can see it. If I need to, I can just kind of rub. If I have too much on there and I want a softer value, I can just have a scrap piece of paper and get rid of some of that charcoal that's on here for a lighter value. All right, so I'm just put that up to the side for myself. And we are starting with the water glass. So I'm actually, no, I'll go sideways. I just want to see which way you can see it the best. So in here, we have some highlights and we have some shadows. So we are going to use our HB, our 6B, and of course our white pencil. So first, let me start by making sure my pencils are nice and sharp if you want to do the same. Charcoal pencil will tend to break a lot quicker than your graphite pencil. So you need to just be careful and sharpen slowly, and then use that sandpaper to sharpen it to a fine point if you need to. So I need just a second. There we go. So when I sharpened slowly, it stopped breaking and I have a nice fine point. All right, so I am starting with my 6B, my softer pencil. And I'm looking for the darkest areas in here. So with charcoal, I like to start with my darkest areas because I can then use them as a source to blend for my medium tones. My medium values, I'm just going to use the paper. So let's start with just our darkest values. I'm going to kind of map out the rim because it's dark. Whoa, lost it already. There we go. All right, so I'm going to map this out. And actually, I just switched to my HB because my pen broke. And remember, it's an oval. It's a skinny oval. And I can erase if I need to, but I'm trying to just work with what I have since I know I'm going to be blending. Doing a very light line on that. Sorry, I'm tilting my paper a little bit. And then I'm thinking of this like a cone. Remember, we broke this into basic forms. So I'm thinking of this like a cone mixed a little bit with a cylinder. And I see that it is dark on this side, so I'm going to start that line. I'm not going to go all the way because notice it goes towards a bright white. So I'm just going to draw in the darkest parts for what I see, and I'm thinking about those forms. So I'm thinking about the cone shape. And then I'm actually going to draw the bottom of this cylinder, and I'm not, again, not going to do the entire thing. I'm just going to do an implied line, and I'm giving the suggestion of where I see that, trying to match the curve up here. A little bit rounder, and a little mark over here. And my eye kind of visually connects that, but we call that an implied line. It starts, stops, starts again, and stops. Let's do the same with the back. It's a cylinder that I can see through, or the base of a cone that I can see through. And again, it has a slight curve to it, so I'm going to do the implied line for the curve that I see. And I notice it almost goes to the edge. There we go. Now I'm not going to do anything down here at the bottom because that's going to be in my white. However, I'm going to go to the very base of how tall I want this to be, and I'm going to draw in just the beginning part of where that glass is. Now I'm finding this a little tricky to kind of map out the whole thing. So I'm just going to start a little bit down there, not worry too much. I can come back because I don't know what those sides look like and it kind of stresses me out a little bit, to be honest. So I'm going to leave that. I'm just going to do a little bit for my base and I'll come back. That stresses me out. All right. Now let's go with your blending stick. I'm going to switch over to my 6B again. I just had to resharpen for a second here. And I'm going to go to my 6B and I'm going to add value into these darkest areas. So I drew that with my HB. You could choose whichever. If you have the 6B already, you are a step ahead. And I'm adding more value to this part where I see it. And I can even now start to add some shading where I see more value. So I just want you to do the same. Just take a peek on your drawing. You need to flip to the other one so you can see it a little closer and just fatten up. Happily plump. Remember the story I said my cousin, after she got married, I asked what they were doing. She's like, nothing, we're just sitting around gaining weight. She's like, I have to call it happily plump. So we're making these happily plump little side edges. And I'm doing implied lines all over the place, just adding in some value in the darkest parts. And I'm leaving the tone of the paper as the middle value. And this is one of the things I love about charcoal. Charcoal is actually my favorite medium to work with. And maybe one of these next things, I'll show you some of my drawings. I do a lot of work in charcoal. I really, really love it. And one of the reasons, if I'm totally honest, why I love it is because it cuts the work in half. You have to be careful with it, right? Because it moves all over the place, and so there's parts of it that are really tricky. But the parts that I love the most are that I can kind of just do some suggestion of things and then not have to do as much work as I kind of feel sometimes in pencil. And so to me, it feels a little faster, if I'm being totally honest. Okay, so if you notice on here, I'm doing a little bit of just some lighter value with my 6B. As I'm doing things in here and just giving myself some things that will be able to blend later on. And I'm just doing that top portion, okay? Didn't take me very long. Now I'm gonna go back with my blending stick and just kind of go over some of those edges. Now, if you look at the water glass, it is really sharp on this outside right side. So I'm not gonna kind of do too much on the outside. I wanna keep those edges really sharp. So I'm going to take this and blend this in towards the inside. And I'm working on top of that dark area that I just drew, just to soften it a little bit. And you're going to notice it's going to smear really quickly. And it's going to spread your value really quickly. So if you notice, I'm not really pulling it too far inside the water glass. I'm just really softening what I have here so it doesn't look like I just drew it and it has that, that gradation that I'm looking for, but they're still kind of chunky. I'm just going from sharp to moving some of those marks around. I have not completely faded on this left side. I'm not going to touch it. I'm just filling in any gaps that the pencil may have left. And then I'm going to clean off my blending stick before I try and do some fading with this. I'm just smudging up the marks that I already made. Okay, really soft. Now, this is where I keep that Post-it note or a scrap piece of paper, maybe a page in your sketchbook, whatever you need. And I'm just going to start rubbing off some of that graphite. And you're going to see right away how much came off. Okay, rotate that around. And I'm going to go back to some of these lighter areas that I want to blend out and take just the very outside edge. I'm not going all the way into that dark area. I'm just going to the very outside edge and just slowly, slowly blending away some of those things. If you notice it's picking up too much, try to stay closer to the edge. You know, clean off your blending stick. Blend again. Clean off. Just go back and forth until you get kind of what you like. Trying to get going from black into this dark gray, fading away. Trying to leave space where I know those white areas are going to be. I don't need to be too worried about it, but if I can, leave some empty space. let this gray fade into just the brown of my paper. Now please keep in mind, as I said, charcoal is my favorite medium, so I have been working with charcoal for a while. It's not my first use in charcoal. So if yours is not turning out exactly as you had hoped, please be kind and gentle with yourself. And anytime you can go back and you can try it again. You will get much better with practice. You'll get much better if you just be nice to yourself and just be like, whew, that didn't work. Let me try something else. There we go. All right, now on this top opening part, I'm noticing that there's a lot of gray in here. So I'm just fading this whole thing away. I'm really trying to avoid hitting those darkest areas, but because I already blended them the first time, they're not going to move quite as much as if I hadn't done that first step. But I am trying to avoid those. I'm just going right up to the edge and just smoothing out my edges. So it fades away. Remember, I keep cleaning off my blending stick as I need to. In the top surface of the water, you're going to see it's pretty chunky. It doesn't fade as much. It's like black, then it's white, black, then it's white, because the highlights are right next to the shadows. So I'm not going to do a ton of stuff here in the surface of this water. I'm just going to kind of make sure I smoothed out the inside of it and kind of leave it alone. Look at that. Good job. All right. Now, remember how I said I was a little nervous about doing this base? Since I've kind of blended the top, I've gained a little bit of confidence, and I'm going to go in again. I'm going to switch to my HB actually, and I'm just going to mark out this little implied line. And I like to build my confidence in pieces. Right? Don't think that artists always know what they're doing or where they're going. It's a lot about discovery as you're doing it. So I mapped it out in my HB because it was a little bit later. Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm doing a little bit of a shadow. And I'm doing some blending. Remember, I just smear off that darkest area and clean off a little bit, and I can start to pull it. And now I'm using my blending stick to really draw into here and using this gray to define where the water is, because it's really light. So if I made a huge mistake, you know, I could erase out or just blend it into nothing and draw over it. And I'm just kind of using this gray value to help me along. Why? Because it's not as scary. And remember, we're using the tone of the paper as our mid-tone. So I actually just need to blend this shadow out over here, and then I can leave it alone. Leave it alone, leave it alone. Okay, let's see on the right-hand side. I'm not ready to do that. Let's try this base. I know, it's scary. It's floating all by itself. Let's pause. Let's not do it. Let's not do it. Let's not do the scary things. Let's go back and do something that's a little easier. Sometimes you got to do the hard things. Sometimes you got to build your confidence to do the really hard things. If you were already at advanced art, I would say let's look at proportion and let's look at spacing. If I would measure the distance from the top, measure the distance from the bottom, make sure those things are even, and then we would map this out. But we're not there yet. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick, okay? Here's a trick. We're going to switch to the white because I'm going to show you how the white works anyway. The white is the same as the black, just in reverse. Now with the white, you are not going to be able to use your blending stick. Why? Because it's dirty. All right, and we want these whites to have a different texture, so they stand out as highlights. So we don't want to smudge out my highlights, so I'm going to have to do this a little differently. I could use my third blending stick if I wanted to, but I am going to challenge you. Ooh. I didn't let you get away from the scary thing. I'm going to challenge you to just use the white and the pressure of your pencil as a way to blend. So notice how my hand is back far on my pencil. It's not up close. I'm doing that so I have less tension and less pressure. And I'm slowly building the surface and the value. And I'm slowly adding white to this. And we're thinking back to what we did with Scratchboard. If I do light pressure, it is a much darker value. If I do harder pressure, it's going to be a brighter value. So I'm starting and just putting in my lightest values. It might overlap some of your gray areas, but I'm trying to keep some sharp edges on these highlights because it's a water glass and I have really pretty sharp highlights on that. Look at this line over here. Sharp, bright highlight. What do? I draw in a sharp, bright highlight. Am I going to blend it? No way. Light reflected off of surfaces tends to be sharp in some areas. And that is another reason why I am suggesting that you don't use a blending stick to give a much better illusion of highlights. So I want you to start to just find some of those spots and just put them in. Sorry, I'm a talker in demonstrations. I'm just gonna talk the whole way through. All right, so, and I'm just kind of showing you my thinking as well. This is how I think about things as I'm processing. This is all the stuff that would be happening in my brain. Welcome to my brain. And I'm going to do another highlight over here. I'm doing a lot less pressure because it's a darker highlight. This one is probably in the back of the glass, so I want to go really soft. And I'm being nice to myself. If it's not the exact same shape, it doesn't matter because I won't have this drawing in the end and you'll just see my water glass and be like, ooh, Miss Reed, you're so amazing. I'm like, I know, thank you, thank you. If I put it next to there, like, oh, this is where you messed up. So we don't have the drawing later. You just have, we don't have the photo, we just have your drawing. So be nice to yourself. All right, notice I am doing closer on my pressure with my pencil. I'm gonna make these areas a little sharper and a little bit brighter. If you want to start by making them softer and darker, you can do that and just go back. Notice how some of these highlights curve just a little bit. If I curve my lines in my highlight value, it will make the glass seem curvier. Ooh, fancy, fancy. And let's go back. Brighten up any bright, bright spots you need for super bright highlights. Let them fade away for softer highlights. Right on the rim of this glass, there's a little highlight that goes sideways to give us the illusion that the glass has a little bit of a lip to it. So I'm going to put that in. Great. Try the surface of the water. You can start to fill in some of these gaps. Do not fill in all of your paper. One of the benefits of using charcoal that is both white and black is that they meet together to give a little bit in each area. And then you have something that's in the middle. So I put in my highlights, I put in my shadows, and I might blend, but I might not blend. Don't be afraid of leaving some of the tone of the paper. Sometimes they cross over, and sometimes you don't want them to. Like over here, I want a little bit of that gray, so I'm going to very softly let them crisscross and get that beautiful mixed value in there. Over here, there is no charcoal, so it just is a much brighter white. And then I can go back, brighten up anything I need. Did you notice that water spot that's on the glass? Let's do it. Let's do it. Don't be afraid of it. I'm taking my HB. I see this little tiny water spot. I have done the white value and the black value, and I notice inside the middle of this white value there's a little bit of a black spot. And I'm just gonna put that in. Touch it up with the white drop. There we go. Over here, there's a little white mark on top of the black area. It's a little water spot. Ta-da! All right, my video is getting a little bit long. So I might fast forward, I might not. All right, on this side, we are going to draw in the side. And this time now, I'm drawing this in with the white because why? It was scary. But now it's not so scary because I've had practice with both. And we're going to do what we did with the black with the white over here. We're going to use the tone of that paper, and I see it's almost like a diamond or a hexagon pattern inside there. So I'm drawing that out, kind of naming things for my left brain, which likes things named. My logical side, it likes to name stuff, so I named some shapes for myself. Helps my brain. And I'm going to go ahead and add some value in. So I have a very dark highlight. I can go back and add my brights into that in just a minute, but I'm going to go over here to the other side, and this one is more like a hexagony blob. So add that in. Follow the side of this glass, and this one actually, this highlight on the left goes all the way down and meets the bottom. So I have this V shape. Some dots in here, and I'm actually not adding any of the black charcoal to this area. I am going to use the tone of the paper on the bottom. Okay, let's go back and add your bright spots. And please don't worry that it looks kind of choppy. We are actually going to do, I know I told you we weren't going to mix them. We are. Just map out the highlights where you are happy with them. Now I usually like to do my highlights after I have some of the black charcoal in because I can do that gray. So I'm just going to stop right here. And I am actually going to go back. I know I said I wasn't going to, but I am going to take this blending stick that does have some black charcoal on it and use it to give a little bit of gray to this base, the base of the glass, because I do want some of this gray mixed in here. And it still looks a little chunky, but I think it's actually going to smooth itself out once I have more of the black charcoal. It just seems a little disjointed compared to the top because it's only one kind of charcoal right now. So give yourself a little bit of blending on there. Don't worry too much about it. Soften it up just a little bit. When you're done, I would recommend you kind of clean it off just so we don't contaminate the black. We want each one to be as bold as possible. And then they could mix in some places and be friends. There we go. I like it, I like it. All right, 6B. We are going to go in now that it's less scary, and we are going to map out this darkest value. Notice how it sneaks right in here, little smile line. And remember, we just started out by mapping it out. We did not worry about blending it smooth right away. So in the same way, just kind of sketch it in, okay? Where is it the darkest? Take my blending stick and I go back in to that darkest area. I'm staying within the boundaries of this darkest area, and I am mapping this out. Smoothing just a little bit. Using some of that cleaning off my blending stick, adding a little gray in here if I need to. So I showed you two different ways to do this, like starting with the black or starting with the white. In general, I liked what I did on the top a little better. I was a little afraid down here. To me, it feels just a little disjointed. It doesn't look quite as nice as the top, so I almost wish I would have started with the dark, even though it was scary. But you decide. Maybe it worked out better for you. Something I learned. I'm adding in the dark value, blending across. Okay, we are getting there. It is not totally perfect, but I'm getting there. All right, now I'm gonna go in reverse down here. I'm taking my HB. I'm adding in any details that I need through here. Starting to come together for me. So it's kind of interesting, right, that they reverse themselves on the top of the glass versus the bottom of the glass. And just decide how much pressure or detail you want. You might want to switch between the HB, the 6B, really give yourself some different value. I'm doing a little bit more mark making on the bottom and leaving some of these marks so you can see what I was doing. I'm not necessarily blending them smooth yet. And as I'm working through this, I'm finding it really coming together now. Like I was a little worried about it, but as I'm working on it, it's starting to pull itself together. It's a little trickier when you have these highlights and you're going in reverse. But what did I do? I was nice to myself. I was like, I don't know how it's gonna work out. Let's just give it a try and see. And lo and behold, it started to work out. Decide where you want to go back and add some highlights, where you want to soften up and add some shadows. Now, I'm not sure how far we're going to get in class, so some of this you may be checking on your own, doing this a little bit later. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a little bit of definition on my edges, just because I want the whole glass to fit together as one object. So this left side is looking pretty good. I have a nice strong bold line. If you notice, I added some white on this edge to give the illusion of a sharp edge and a sharp line. I'm going to take my HB, and you can see this little tiny black line there too. I'm going to just kind of do this implied line right on the edge. It just helps refine and ground my object. And I do the reverse over here. I do this white line, help define and ground my object. Adjust my curve if I need to. And then sometimes I just get artistic. I'm like, you know what, I don't see a black line there, but I feel like it needs something just to kind of hold it in place. And I just do a little implied line. Just kind of pull that piece together. Okay. So I want you to decide on some of those things. And your goal is just to finish up your little water glass. Hey, I'm gonna add a little shadow. So I really ground this guy. And I might do this just and leave it some texture. Just lighter pressure as it fades away. I kind of really like that. And I have my water glass. It's got a weird little bump over there, but you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. That's a little highlight. All right, so I hope the water glass works out well for you so you can kind of understand the difference between white and black charcoal, how you're going to blend things, which one to do first, which one to do second. I'm really happy with the top of my glass. I almost wish I would start with a darker value first on the bottom of the glass, but it was a good learning experience for me. Lets me decide how I want to handle things in the future and what is working the best for me. So I hope you tried both of them. I hope it worked out well for you. Feel free to make adjustments, go back, do whatever you'd like to do, maybe even just try a new one. Good luck.